integral part of what's going on now. So today we're going to talk about some issues in COVID-19, and we think Leah West, who will introduce Congressman Darren Soto from District 9, the 9th District rather, Florida. And we thank each of you for participating this afternoon, and we look forward to having a lively discussion and basically providing information that is needed through this pandemic. So take it away, Leah.
Good afternoon, everyone. Again, I'm Leah West. I'm with the Office of Congressman Darren Soto, District 9. I'm the Polk County Outreach Representative. And I would like to introduce to some and present to others Congressman Darren Soto. He's entered into the public service for hardworking Floridians. He's served for over a decade in the Florida legislature. He's fought for to create high-paying jobs, also to increase access to higher education, and also to make sure that we have clean water and land for all of his constituents. In 2016, he became the first Puerto Rican from Florida to serve in Congress. He now serves on the House Committee on Energy and Commerce and Natural Resources. Every day he's working hard to make sure that any inequalities and disparities are addressed and make it better for all citizens in our 9th district. I present to you all Congressman Soto. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, and with a lot of help from Mrs. Leah West, of course, in working on so many of these issues. Thank you, Ms. Doris, for helping put this together, and thank you to the African American Chamber of Commerce of Polk County for being with us. We know we're facing a nearly unprecedented crisis. We haven't had a pandemic like this since 1918, and Congress has stepped up with a nearly unprecedented response. And I'm going to go through some of the major aspects of that, but also spend most of my time on relief related to small businesses and updates on that, as well as efforts to help with the disparity in health effects of COVID-19 to communities of color across the district. We know so many families are hurting, whether they're at home and working from home, or whether they've lost their jobs, whether there are children who can't return to school for the rest of the year. My wife is a public school math and science coach in Osceola County, and we see every day good work our educators are doing. Our first responders who are on the front lines, putting themselves at risk every day to help our vulnerable populations, to our small businesses who are wondering, and I had a small business for 15 years and had to make a payroll twice a month. So I know what it's like, wondering where that next payroll is going to come from and how they're going to stay in business. And so we're going to talk about some of those issues here today. It was about 3 weeks ago that we passed the landmark $2.2 trillion Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Securities Act, also known as the CARES Act. It's the largest relief package ever passed by the Congress in the history of our nation. There are a couple key parts to it. The first of which is $1,200 to each individual, plus $500 per child in stimulus payments. The first of which started going out last week. If you make $75,000 or less a year, you're eligible for $1,200. If you make $75,000 to $99,000 a year, you're eligible for a smaller check, and those making $100,000 or over would be ineligible because we're focusing on the middle class and those most in need. So an average family of four can expect $3,400 in stimulus payments based upon that formula. This past week, going into this week, into early next week, we should see pretty much all, if not most, of our Social Security beneficiaries and supplemental security income beneficiaries will receive their stimulus payments. We started getting word from constituents that they started receiving them last week. 99% of these beneficiaries, they have direct deposit for their payments. So this will come in the form of direct deposit. We'll start seeing a lot more of the payments going out for taxpayers who are not Social Security or Social Security supplemental security beneficiaries going out in the first week of May onward. I cannot stress enough, if you remember nothing else from this call, please request direct deposit if you already don't have that signed up with the IRS, and you'll be able to do that through the Get My Payment app online. Again, that's the Get My Payment app online that you'll be able to sign up for. I did want to talk about some of the frequently caused delays and issues that we've seen so far to be on the lookout for. But before that, so some of you, you get your tax refund, you get it by direct deposit, you're all set up. Some of you didn't, and now you're going to go hopefully register for direct deposit. But some of you, I know as a small business, I owed usually pretty much every year and had to pay. So you may not have your direct deposit on line with the IRS. So you're going to want to request that. Or those of you who just simply didn't owe anything or didn't have a tax refund, but didn't, you didn't owe anything, you're going to want to do that too. You're going to want to register online. Everybody should be doing that because it could take from May through June or beyond for some folks to get their checks. Unfortunately, it was our intent to get this out as soon as possible in April and early May. And for those who still don't get direct deposit, it'll go in order of the poorest Americans onto the wealthiest as far as the order each week of physical checks going out. So again, the main takeaway, please get your direct deposit. It'll come much quicker. We know people can't wait for relief any longer. Some frequently caused delays. The financial institution may not have processed the check yet. That could delay by a day or two sometimes. So you're going to want to talk to your bank or credit union or other financial institution. Those of you who've used H&R Block, TurboTax, or other tax services, and I know I've used those in the past, there may be a direct deposit account that they set up for you. And that stimulus payment will go there. So whether you used it over the last 2 years in 2018 or 2019, you're going to want to reach out to the tax professional you work with because it could go to that account. Some of you may still have old bank accounts on file with the IRS. Of course, you're going to want to make sure to update that or at least check your old accounts. And if they're closed, make sure to update it. And so those are some of the reasons we've seen some delays. Now, once the payment is sent, 15 days after sending the payment, the IRS is required to send you a notice that tells you the method of the payment, the amount of the payment, and a phone number and appropriate point of contact at the IRS to report any failure to receive the money. So in the last resort, that'll be big help for taxpayers who got their payment sent but never received it. Of course, in the meantime, you can reach out to our office for any questions or any assistance on stimulus checks. Right now, we're predominantly working with our Social Security recipients since they're the ones who are receiving them right now. Our main office number, just so everybody has it, is 407-452-1171. Again, that's 407-452-1171. We also, as you know, have offices in 3 city halls in Polk County, predominantly in Winter Haven, with office hours in Haines City and Lake Wales. Although everything is, of course, everybody's working from home right now. So that'll be key. For the unemployment benefits, we have a new pandemic unemployment assistance benefit on the federal level that was passed in the CARES Act for $600 a week for up to 4 months. It also has expanded eligibility. It applies to former employees. It applies to employees who lost hours. And it applies to independent contractors, various gig economy workers, everyone from a barber or a hairdresser to a Lyft or Uber driver to consultants and other folks who receive 1099s. Some of you who are self-employed as businesses, you would be eligible if you had a loss in income. You'll hear in a moment, you may also, in addition, or in the alternative, be eligible for the Paycheck Protection Program I'll go into. This benefit is on top of the $275 per week for up to 12 weeks for the state benefit. However, the state benefit is far more restrictive. You have to have been an employee who lost your job. That's the only people who are eligible for the state benefit. You apply using the same process. And let's be frank, it has been an absolute disaster, the state website. Let me give you an update on some of the things we're doing to help them. First, we gave them $29 million in federal funds from the U.S. Department of Labor 2 weeks ago to help get their act together with, and they've used that to get 72 new servers. There are new paper applications for those of you who are just frustrated, or friends of yours who are just frustrated with getting bounced off online, or your calls dropped. You could fill out those new paper applications and send them in via FedEx for free. In addition, they've hired 3 new call centers to help with the flow. But there's no doubt about it. Florida has been the slowest in the nation, with 7 out of 8 people requesting unemployment benefits, still not getting them yet. We have sent several letters over the last couple of days, putting the pressure on, getting on in the press to talk about our disappointment with this, but we're putting our money where our mouth is to help them get their act together. In addition, because our state Senate offices and our state rep offices have been overwhelmed and clearly are unable to handle all these unemployment applications, I've authorized our staff as of this past week to start handling these cases directly. These are supposed to be state jurisdiction cases, and we already have the stimulus check cases and the paycheck protection and other small business cases, but we are taking these on too because it's a crisis. But I can't stress enough the great work of folks like Ms. Leah West, who have stepped up to help handle the load of state offices that can't seem to get all these cases under a handle. So we're doing everything we can, and even beyond our jurisdiction, to help out, because it's all hands on deck right now. We know that. A couple updates on the unemployment. There is going to be some retroactivity. The good news is it'll be retroactivity for your application as of the date that you filed it, or tried to file it rather, because of all the issues with the website. But they're not doing retroactivity as of the date of the job loss. Obviously, we support as of the date of the job loss, but there's some improvement. That's going to be something that you're going to want to work with as you start getting your benefits, or those you know. In addition, the biweekly job search under law has been waived for everyone. Obviously, while there's a few industries hiring, particularly in the healthcare sector, a lot of folks are really hurting right now, and businesses are letting folks go. In addition, we have been putting the pressure on the state because they still haven't gotten their act together on the application for independent contractors. Remember, I mentioned that the federal benefit provides this $600 benefit for independent contractors who have a loss of business or no business right now. They have not put together this application yet. We have asked because by the end of the week, we could start losing benefits if there's not an extension to it, because it's a 4-month benefit. The DeSantis administration has said they're going to get this application together by the end of the week. We will continue to put the pressure on them. This should have been done last week or the week before, unfortunately. But some of this stuff, it's in the hands of the state government, and we'll continue to do our best to hold them accountable. Going on to the small business program, we enacted a $367 billion loan program for small businesses. And it provided, over the course of nearly 11 days, with 52,000 loans for the Paycheck Protection Program, totaling $12.6 billion. And it got tapped out. The good news is more funding happened this week. I know someone who was, okay, we're going to continue on. So just going over the basis of that program, I know many of you may be familiar from prior calls we did, but it is primarily.
Oh, you caller. Right there. I'm trying to.
Excuse me, can you put mute on your phone, whoever is being loud right now? Thank you. This applies to help keep workers employed. So the Paycheck Protection Program allows businesses to get up to 2.5 months of their payroll paid and the loan forgiven. You have to use 75% of this funding for your employees. So of that $12.6 billion that got out already to Florida, 75% of that has to be used to keep people employed. You could apply through your local banks, community banks, and credit unions. Obviously, there's been severe flaws. In this program. We saw some major businesses that had franchises qualify when that wasn't Congress's intent through loopholes that we are working to fix. And we saw a lot of the smallest of businesses, because the banks favored their bigger clients. We saw a lot of their smaller businesses get stuck on the end of the line, particularly if you had one of the largest banks like Bank of America or Wells Fargo, they had $10 billion caps. Now, Bank of America had a $10 billion cap because they self-imposed it, while Wells Fargo had it because of penalties related to soliciting bank accounts that they shouldn't have. The good news is that we are going to help with both those caps by buying up these loans so that we can keep under those caps. But the better news is that we've segmented out $60 billion of the upcoming funds must go through local community banks and to credit unions to serve communities of color, including minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, as well as veteran-owned businesses. So that's a key success. Obviously, it's not the magic solution to everything. We wanted half that money to go to that. But as you could tell, with a government where House Democrats control the House, Republicans control the presidency and the Senate, many of these things are compromises that I would personally be doing more if I were the king of the world, but we have a democracy. So we have some victories, but they're by no means going to fix everything. I'm going to go over some more of the improvements later on. But if you've already signed up and you're in queue, that's good. I hope that all of you did so. And if not, please continue to try to put in your applications. When the new funding's approved, when I return to Washington tonight for the vote tomorrow, we should see applications come back online again. This is a perfect example. And I know when I had my small business, it really matters if you're going to work and bank with a local community bank or a local credit union, because a lot of these folks who went with the large banks, who were small businesses, got lost in the shuffle. Because there's a huge difference, unfortunately, between a small business that has 400 employees to their banking relationship versus 4 employees. While we segmented out the 60 billion, it's just I think a life lesson for all of us going forward that these smaller banks and community credit unions are focused more to help small businesses than a lot of these bigger ones. I want to also go into the help for healthcare. This is a pandemic. I serve in the Energy and Commerce Committee. We got on that committee this year. It was a big fight, and most healthcare goes through that committee. It's one of the only 2 exclusive committees in Congress, so we're honored to be on that committee. That we just heard from the FDA commissioner just before this call, and I'm going to go into some of the updates on that. In the last bill, we put out $130 billion for hospitals. The first $30 billion was released 2 Fridays ago, and Florida received over $2.2 billion for our local hospitals to 22,000 providers. And boy, not only do they need that, but they need more money, because we know that the healthcare providers and our first responders, federally qualified health clinics and nursing homes are the front lines of this pandemic. So I'm proud to announce that there's going to be another $75 billion that'll be approved in this extension package to help out. But what does that mean locally? One last thing I want to talk about before going into the specific addressing of communities of color and the issue with COVID-19. We will do better on the next round of funding than we did even on the last round, because it'll take more consideration of Medicare Advantage, Medicaid, and other programs that Florida really gets a lot of their hospital funding from. I want to take the remainder of my time to talk about what we're doing to help out communities of color and then next steps with this next package. You know, I recognize that COVID-19 has particularly hit hard communities of color in our district, whether it's the African-American community, my fellow Hispanics, or the Asian communities that we have in this district. We started by getting free testing, but we know there's not enough of it, which is why one of the big fights was to get additional testing funding into this package. And we did $25 billion in additional testing, which is absolutely critical. When we talk with folks like Baycare or Central Florida health clinics, I think we timed out. Can you all hear me?
I can. Yes,
okay.
Go ahead.
Sorry, we had a blip for a second. When we talk about the work that Baycare is doing, Central Florida Healthcare, our federally qualified health clinics in Polk County, as well as Advent Health, which took over for Heart of Florida, we are working with them each week to get the supplies that they need multiple times a week to help keep those free testing sites that they have open, which they've had to close every now and again and reopen. In addition, Central Florida Healthcare did get 2 grants totaling $1.7 million over the last 2 weeks. We know they are on the front lines, really just as much as Baycare and Advent Health on helping out. One of the things, in addition to in Point Siena, in our primary care services, our federally qualified health clinics in Osceola got $1.4 million. So we know that $1.7 million is going to go a long way to helping out with hard-hit communities. One of the things we're working on right now is making sure mobile testing sites are brought directly to communities of color that are hard hit. And frankly, there's been mixed success throughout the district. We had mobile testing sites get into East Orlando, where they needed help. Avalon Park, where they needed help, which is in far East Orange County. In Kissimmee, in Osceola County, where we've needed help. We are working with Central Florida Healthcare to put these mobile units in place. And frankly, they haven't agreed to it yet. So we're going to really, really turn up the heat because other areas of the district have these mobile units already. And I can assure you, Ms. Leah West is working overtime to make sure that they do that. But I did want to mention to also reach out to them, to encourage them, because we've seen mobile sites in other areas of the district, and this is unacceptable. Personally, right before this call, I reached out to Florida Department of Emergency Management Administrator Jared Moskowitz about getting additional supply requests that Central Florida Healthcare has to help them with these mobile units. And he literally texted me while I'm on this call, so I'll return his text in a few minutes. But we're doing this every couple days throughout the week to continue to make sure that we're bringing in personal protective equipment, which is key to addressing these inequities. In addition, we met with DaVita and other dialysis clinics across Polk County to make sure that they are up and running and safe, because our most vulnerable residents are those who are on dialysis. And I had my most recent meeting with DaVita this morning. They have excellent protocols in place to keep so many, unfortunately, there are a lot of folks in our Hispanic community and our African-American community and other communities who have diabetes and are on dialysis. And so we're going to continue to monitor that, to take extra special attention to communities of color being cared for during this crisis. In addition, we've, as you know, as a member of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, we've worked on tri-caucus efforts, which includes not only the Hispanic Caucus, but the Congressional Black Caucus and the Asian and Pacific Islander Caucus. The tri-caucus has led several key letters over the past couple of days. One, to increase coronavirus public announcements for local and ethnic media outlets best positioned to deliver critical information. This is something that not only we're working on, but this was one of the main requests we've heard from many of you. That was the discussion of a internal conversation yesterday in our office with Ms. Leah West, Nicole McLaren, and others in our office. We also just signed on to Health Equity and Accountability Act, which is a comprehensive and strategic long-term strategy to eliminate racial and ethnic disparities in healthcare. This is, while these are things that we're working on, things that have already passed, that many of you have heard me talk about, are dealing with closing the gap for maternal mortality among African-American mothers and children. This is something that's actually got into the last budget, and we're working on other areas, but we're very concerned because particularly African-American women who live in urban areas are 10 times more likely to either have them or their child pass. Well, that's not directly related to COVID-19. I do want to talk about some of the successes that have passed. And you know why that happened? Because we have the most diverse House of Representatives in the history of Congress, the most female, the most African-American, the most Hispanic Congress in the history of our nation. And that's how some of those things end up happening. Lastly, in this area, I want to talk about our constant coronavirus pandemic outreach. We've had an NAACP teleconference. We've had 3 Spanish language town hall meetings. We're about to have a Muslim American town hall meeting right after this call, and Jewish American teleconference later this week. We have obviously today's conference with the African American Chamber, and that is in addition to weekly constituent teletown halls that are for everyone. And we'll continue to focus on not only the general constituency that we're honored to represent, but also to make sure that we we're reaching out to communities that are particularly hard hit. Lastly, I want to briefly talk about what we've received locally in Polk County. They received $3.2 million just last week to help out with our COVID-19 response. But there is an issue going on with small cities that were left out of the recent community development block grants, while St. Cloud, Orlando, and Kissimmee all received grants because there are over 50,000 people. There are important cities like Haines City and Winter Haven that were just under the 50,000 mark that we have signed on to bills to help out because their first responders are working hard with Polk County to help out. And unfortunately, they were left out of them. Because I want to spend the rest of my time on questions, let me just finish by saying that this new funding package that we will vote on this week includes $370 billion in new funding for the small business assistance. That's $310 billion for the Paycheck Protection Program that we discussed. That'll be critical to helping out small businesses, with $60 billion reserved, $30 billion for community-based lenders, small banks and credit unions, and $30 billion for medium-sized banks and credit unions, an additional $50 billion for SBA disaster lending, and $10 billion for SBA disaster grants. We also included our nation's farmers in this relief. They were left out of it, unfortunately, which also is huge for Polk County. And then we talked about the $75 billion to help out with hospitals, nursing homes, and federally qualified health clinics. So we should see another round of funding, several rounds of funding for our hospitals and federally qualified health clinic. And the two things that I think are most critical, $25 billion for testing, because that's how we get our freedom back economically. That's how we reopen. We have to have enough testing, and we have to have enough monitoring, because if we can't monitor and test enough, we'll never fully understand the extent of new COVID-19 outbreaks, and we could end up right back where we started, and our loved ones dying at a record pace that we haven't seen in a pandemic since 1918, over 100 years ago. There's also national strategic testing policy. That was something that House Democrats were insistent in. We can't just leave this to the states alone. It'll be a mess. You could have one state doing the wrong thing and have an outbreak affect other states. We see that with Georgia today, and don't even get me started on that. The reopening, and if our neighbors screw up, the folks from Jacksonville to Tallahassee and beyond are going to be feeling it, because this disease knows no borders, and it's something that we need to be careful of. So with that, I want to spend the rest of my time on questions, but I know there's a lot of important issues that were important to go over on the onset that many of you may be very concerned about, as you should.
Okay, so if you can unmute Jill so that we can find out who has a question. Pastor Lake, you have a question, please?
I'm going to go ahead and read the questions from the chat first, if that's okay, since those were put in first. Thank you, Congressman Soto. I'm Jill Dorsett. I'm Secretary for the Chamber. This question that came through is from Dexter Harris. He wants to know, what is the timetable for SBA disaster relief funds direct deposit?
So some folks should start receiving their funds by late week, but we've been told this week and next week is when most of the funds should come in. Keep in mind, they give us pretty vague timetables. So I give you directly what I'm giving, just like how we know our Social Security beneficiaries should all receive their checks before the end of the month. They have direct deposit. So by the end of next week, he should receive that funding.
Okay. This next question is from Pastor Eddie Lake. He wants to know, are all FedEx locations in Florida participating in mailing the unemployment applications?
So our state reps and state senators have told me that most of them are running them through their office and FedEx is picking them up. So I don't want to speak out of turn and say that I don't know whether all the FedEx locations are participating in the program, but I do know that most of the state reps and state senators are accepting these paper applications from their offices, and they're being picked up for free. We'll have Ms. Leah West reach out to some of our local state reps to get you an answer to that question. But I've been told they're doing it for free. I don't want to misspeak though and say every location is doing it that way, and then people get out of their houses during a pandemic and find that there's money they can't afford that they have to spend.
Okay, he also had another question regarding the mobile units. How do you know where they're needed, where the mobile units are needed?
So we get literally daily updates on where COVID-19 cases are happening and mortality rates, which is my biggest concern. We've seen Polk County fairly hard hit compared to other counties like Miami-Dade, which was deeply hard hit. But we've seen a disturbing high mortality rate among African Americans and to a certain extent Hispanics. So my main concern right now is to stop this high rate of mortality. And so Leah West has given me some recommendations of different communities that she's encouraged the mobile sites to go to. And of course, Central Florida Health Clinics will make the final decision because while I'm an overseer and a funder, I'm not the boss of them. So we've encouraged them to look at communities such as the Florenceville community in Winter Haven and areas of Haines City, among others. We'll get you that full list of our recommendations afterwards because I don't want to misspeak, but I know that there's at least 5 or 6 communities that we have requested they bring the mobile units to over the next couple days.
Okay, those were the only questions in the chat. If anyone else has a question, if you'll please limit it to 30 seconds. We are being recorded and it's also on Facebook Live, so please limit your questions to 30 seconds. Once you ask your questions, please mute yourself back. Thank you.
Oh, and excuse me, I did find the email. So we recommended the Jamestown area of Davenport, the Oakland area of Haines City, Lake Alfred, Fruitland Park area, Lake Wales, Lincoln Avenue, and Winter Haven, Florenceville as the recommended areas based upon local input. If you have other areas that we have any either concern or anecdotal evidence of it being a hotspot, please send that information to Mrs. Leah West, and we will add that to our recommendation. Again, Central Florida Health Clinics makes the ultimate decision, but we've helped them with 2 grants and we'll continue to help them. So we're hoping they'll be paying attention, and they do a great job. So the only thing we want to see is those mobile test sites. Everything else has been going as we've asked them to.
Okay. Are there any other questions?
Yes, they are. Doris, I do have a question. Let me first off thank Congressman Soto for his work in his efforts and making sure that we have the resources that we need. Now, my question is in regards to feeding hungry persons. We do have a state-certified food bank at our church, and we gave out on Sunday over 330 persons. But wanted to know what kind of resources are available for organizations like ourselves and for the community just to have access to proper nourishing food.
Thank you for that, Mr. Lake. That great question. Because of my limited time, I didn't go through every aspect, but this is a great time to go into that. We had allocated $48.9 billion for food assistance and to help farmers. Most of that money flows to the 2 food banks serving the district, Feeding Tampa Bay for Polk County, and then Second Harvest for Orange and Osceola County. Now, I know they still charge a small amount to our food pantries, and there are certain responsibilities expected of you all as far as having someone to be a caretaker of it. If you're going to accept frozen foods, you have to have sufficient refrigeration. We have worked with individual food pantries who, because of the obvious fact that we're in a pandemic, may not have the funds to be able to take care of that. We've worked with individual food pantries to help get food to areas that the food pantry just couldn't afford it anymore. Or sometimes there's a technical violation that they'll shut you down for, and we've worked through those too. You know, my thought is no one should be going hungry. This is a code red. So we'll worry about the small infractions and the cost sharing, the small cost sharing later if it becomes a hurdle for our food pantries. Of course, a lot of that money also went to our schools, and I cannot say enough how proud I am of Superintendent Jacqueline Bird for her amazing leadership. We've had multiple conferences with her, and we had a education teleconference with her and other superintendents and teachers and our teachers union, and others across the district. And the hurdles that she's overcome to help feed through the summer waiver program, as well as coming up with 30,000 devices for our school kids. It's just a miracle. So I would be remiss if I didn't talk about how amazing the Polk County schools are to help feeding that. So so most of it would flow to them, and then we would help you make sure you could get the food should you have any financial burdens. And of course, I'm sure you work with some other grocery stores and nonprofits in the area as well. But please let Leah know whatever obstacles you're running into with Feeding Tampa Bay, and we will reach out to them directly. This continues to be an issue. We've treated it as constituent cases to just work it out and keep the food flowing, because in the most prosperous nation in the world, even in a desperate pandemic like this, there is no excuse for anybody to go hungry right now. And thanks for your organization stepping up to help feed Polk County. I know it's sleepless nights right now, and we know the good work you're doing, and thank you on behalf of our constituents.
Thank you, Pastor Lake. I have a question for you, Congressman Soto. Presently, people who are trying to get the test done here in Lakeland, they're having to pay a fee of $49, except at the Bartow Hospital, there's no fee, but they have to have a script from their doctor. Can you tell me the $25 billion, how much of that will be coming to CFHC, and if the test will still be, the testing will be a charge for the test?
So right now, because there's been a lack of testing, it's been narrowed to folks who've come into contact with someone who had COVID-19, seniors, and folks with pre-existing conditions. So we've seen a problem with folks who are not in those three categories getting tests, which is why this $25 billion is going to be so critical. Let me pull up the details on so I get you that information. We have a full breakdown. So you will see $11 billion will go to states, localities, territories, and tribes for the purchase of the tests. $2 billion provided to the states will be for the public health emergencies. Let's see. So $825 million will specifically be for community health centers like Central Florida Healthcare, our federally qualified health center. So in addition to the $75 billion that'll go to hospitals like Advent Health and Baycare, through the state they'll have access to additional testing. So we're hopeful we'll see a significant improvement to populations beyond the three categories I talked about, those who've shown symptoms and come in contact with someone with COVID-19, those who are seniors, and those with pre-existing conditions, so that we'll see more generally most people who have any suspicion that they have COVID-19 will be able to get these tests. Because Lakeland is out of the district, I'm not as familiar with why they're charging over there. But we're happy to work with Congressman Ross Spano to bring that up, because they really shouldn't be charging. We've provided funding, we've provided a right to free testing, but just because there's a federal law doesn't mean everybody's following it all the time. So if you wouldn't mind getting us a couple sentences of background of who's being charged and what institution, and we're happy to work with the rest of the Polk County delegation to get to the bottom of why they're being charged right now. Because while unfortunately some of the treatment we haven't been able to make free yet, even though we passed out a House bill that would have made it free, in the CARES Act, in negotiations with the Senate, the treatment did not ultimately get covered for those without health insurance, which is a travesty. But the testing was funded to be free, but because there's not enough tests, we've seen it inequitably applied. So these stories are really important. That's why we have these teleconferences, because we don't know everything out on the street until people tell us, or I read it in the paper, or someone emails us. So that's why we're doing these daily teleconferences, because we're learning as much through these teleconferences as we are through the paper and reports we get from different constituents. So if you wouldn't mind following up with Mrs. West afterwards on that, we'll help follow up to why people are being charged. But we should see a significant increase over the next 2 weeks I do want to mention one more thing about testing. How the heck did we get here? And I know that's a question a lot of people want to know about, how what happened with the testing. We knew as early as January that there was an issue. And it wasn't just the federal government. Anybody who turned on the TV saw as early to mid-January that there was an outbreak of some sort in China. A lot of us saw this in any number of news outlets. By the middle to end of January, the World Health Organization had a test. It was being used throughout Europe and Asia, and unfortunately, President Trump, through the America First policy, set CDC to make our own tests. And CDC is amazing, so why wouldn't they get it right? Well, they had a contamination in their test, which set us behind 3 to 4 weeks. It's a tragedy that has cost lives, unfortunately. And because some of their manufacturing was contaminated, according to our own federal agencies, by the FDA. So we finally started allowing the local health departments to use part of those tests and start using the World Health Organization tests. So there was 4 weeks in February that we as a nation fell behind, even relative to other areas. So there is a lesson that is to be learned from this, which is, even as we care deeply about our nation, we are never alone, and we can never just go it alone on these things, which is why international relationships are so important. And while we have the greatest nation, I believe, in the history of the world, we aren't perfect at everything. So when we could get help from places like the World Health Organization, we should take it, and we should work with other international community members. So there's a big lesson there that I know for the future, as we have new opportunities to work with the international community, we'll be pushing for. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that President Trump just stopped the funding to the World Health Organization when we're the top funder of it, which is, I'm saving adjectives on this call, and we'll just say I'm disappointed in it. And the Gates Foundation is the second biggest funder, after that many other countries across the world. But we're not alone in this stuff. And this is where, as we look at future policies for the United States, we're strongest when we lead international coalitions, not when we go it alone. And mistakes can happen, because even in this great nation, we're not perfect. We should ramp up to 1.5 million tests by the end of May. With this additional funding, we may be at 2+ million tests a week. We've been told we need 3 million tests a week to really have the number of tests to monitor for everybody who's going to need a test. 3 million a week. So this will get us closer to that. But as all of you are business people, you know you want to reopen your businesses. Some of you are in dire straits. Others of you, depending on your business, are hanging in there. But testing is key to reopening, and monitoring, which will be done through boots on the ground, through the local and state health departments. And then there's technology we can use, but we have to be careful about, where you could even put an app on your cell phone to determine whether you came in contact with anyone with COVID-19. Obviously, we cannot mandate that program. That would be unconstitutional. And not everybody has a cell phone, and not everybody has a phone powerful enough to use these things. But certainly, folks who want to voluntarily sign up for those types of technologies for their own personal awareness, that'll also help. But those are the keys to getting businesses back open: testing, monitoring, and ultimately vaccines, which we should have an experimental vaccine out before the end of the year, which is the last thing I wanted to mention, that we're already in trials. And the big news from the FDA commissioner, when Bobby Rush, the chairman of one of our subcommittees in Energy and Commerce, one of our most powerful African-American members in both the committee and in the Congress from Chicago, asked the FDA commissioner whether the testing groups were going to be diverse. We got reassurances that the vaccine will be tested on a fully diverse group of individuals. We're already starting to see those tests, and we will continue through our committee to make sure that it is, so that we have, at least for those who desperately need it first, most vulnerable, an experimental vaccine be out before the end of the year. Traditionally, these have taken 2 years to 3 years. We don't have that time. So with that, Ms. Doris, I want to give you the last word before I head out to our next meeting, but I'm very grateful for the time. And of course, this is just a continuing conversation. Any questions that I wasn't able to answer, please forward to Ms. Leah West, and we will get those answered for you.
Okay, well, we'd like to thank you so very much for your time today, and we do look forward to follow up with you.
Of course. Thank you, everyone. Be blessed, stay healthy, and we're here to help. We'll get through this together.
Thank
And
you.
we thank you again.
My pleasure.
Okay. So next up, Dr. Joy Jackson is not on today, so we're going to move over to Sharon Mathis. And Ms. Mathis, will you introduce yourself and proceed with sharing information?
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Sharon Mathis, and I'm an equal opportunity diversity representative from Polk County government. And Ms. Bailey wanted to know what was the county doing during COVID-19 for our vendors. And I would like to advise you all that on behalf of our county manager, Bill Beasley, and our commissioners, we are still doing business as usual with some modification. And also last week, we had a webinar to assist some of our vendors up under the CARES Act. And if you did not make that webinar, you can get in touch with the Supply Diversity Administrator, Ms. Deborah Johnson, and her number is 863-534-5959, 534-5959, or Sylvia Blightman Roberts, who is our Small Women and Minority Business Assistant Officer, and her number is 534-6596. The procurement office made a little change, even though the building is not open. We're still taking bids if you want to bring them in. It's a number you can call. It's on the door on the north entrance, and it's 534-6757, 534-6757. Someone would come out to your car and meet you and bring your bid package in. If you decide to do it electronically, we have another opportunity that has been set up. But you have to do a mandatory pre-submittal meeting. It's all online, where you can submit your bids online. The pre-bids or pre-proposal meetings are held by Zoom like we're doing today. And if there's a mandatory site visit, the meeting and site visit will be in person at the address. So on behalf of Polk County government, nothing really has changed. We just modified because the commissioners and the county manager wanted to ensure that we are still serving the people of Polk County during this trying time. And did I go too fast for you?
No, just one. Are there any questions from anyone? Okay. No questions, anyone?
Actually, I do have a question, Eddie Lake here. That I put myself on, open up my screen. Thank you so much for that presentation. Thank you for sharing. I just have a question in regards to support for the local businesses. Can you or are you able to share those who have applied for assistance? Do you have the nationality breakdown?
At this time, Pastor Lake, we do not, because I'm not sure who all have applied. I can get that information, get your information, and follow up with the email or phone call to you.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Pastor Lake, can you privately send her your email address or number that you would like to have her contact you to?
I sure will. I'll put it in the chat. Thank you.
Okay.
Ms. Mathis, what is your contact information for me to put in the chat, please?
Sharon Mathis, no spaces. That's SharonMathis at Polk, P-O-L-K, dash, not a hyphen, but dash county.net.
Okay. Are there other questions or comments? Okay. Pastor Lake is going to share some information with us today about Census Counts 2020. Pastor Lake, would you take it away, please?
Excellent. Thank you, Doris. Thank you, Master Mathis, again. And of course, we want to thank Representative Soto for sharing with us. That was powerful. Appreciate that. But I just want to speak in regards to the significance and the importance of making sure that all of us are counted during this census. And so you should have received a card in the mail with a separate and unique number to it at every household to make sure you can get online to register to offer your account. And so it's vitally important. And all of you, I know all of you know this, but we have to do a wonderful job of sharing this information with people so that we can make sure we have access to the federal funding, resources, and programs for each state regarding infrastructure, roads, healthcare, hospitals, schools, which is so important, social safety net, small businesses, and these are important issues, but not just these hot topic buttons and issues that we have to look at. But we have to make sure that everyone understands the value of them being counted, because the more we're counted, the more resources we have access to in our community, and our community definitely needs resources. So I encourage all of you to continue to share the word, the persons who are involved with your congregations, your organizations, your family, your friends, your loved ones. Even in the midst of this crisis, this is a significant effort that we have to participate in. And we have several commercials going out. I'm involved with a commercial with the city of Lakeland and as well with the county, just to get the message out and to hopefully have everyone counted. Now, if there are concerns about having access to the internet, you can either request a hard copy be sent to you, or if you would like to have access to the internet, please feel free to reach out to us. We can definitely help you and your family to make sure that they can have the ability to complete those forms for the census. So if you have any questions, we'll try to answer any questions. But Doris, I want to thank you for this privilege and opportunity to share the significance behind this census, even during this crisis moment. We've got a lot of other things and what appears to be more important things to address, but this is just as significant. And my concern is as we're dealing with all of this madness, even from within the government, from the state government, and things that we don't understand and maybe confused about, and fear and worry, we must not forget the value and the importance of being counted in this census.
Okay, I totally concur with that statement, and we thank you again too. So I'd like to.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Dexter.
All right, my name is Pastor Dexter Lamar Harris. I'm the pastor of Williams Temple Sealing Church in Winter Haven, Florida. I was asked to join this conference today by one of my members concerning, I think the email chain said something about congregating, and the concern was about people congregating in Polk County. And one of the concerns I do have is that I know we're seeing the numbers. I think we have 12 that may have died or more since I looked at the last statistic in Polk County. And we saw almost half of those numbers is in the African-American community. I actually live in the Orange County area, even though I pastor in Polk County. And some of the questions and some of the information that people are doing here, because we're getting hit real hard. The numbers are they're up. I'm glad to hear that only 12 folks died in the Winter Haven area, but here in Orlando area, the numbers are way higher. And so there are some different concerns in the community where I'm from. A lot of people have concerns about, especially the young people I interviewed, they have a concern about what is the source of this sickness. They have been doing research themselves. They're not just sitting around not trying to use their brain on what's going on. And they're looking at other alternative sources of sickness, such as technology could be producing these sicknesses or what. And this is a real major concern here in Orlando, because one grassroots organization put out a map of all of the 5G towers in the city compared to all of the deaths in the city, and there was a correlation between the two. And so that caused major concern that, yes, even though COVID-19 is a viral kind of infectious sickness, radiation sickness also mimics the symptoms of COVID-19. So it's a big concern here in Orange County concerning other causes of sickness that could be going on than a virus, because when you look at most healthcare professionals, you ask them about the nature of viruses, and they would tell you a virus can't be violent or contagious past 24 hours. You look at most of the research It's not the same what we see in the news that a virus can last about 14 days, which we're being reported. So this concern, I just wanted to raise it. Oh, that this concern is being raised here in Orange County, that people are doing some grassroots research, if you will, because it seems as though maybe this voice of this concern may not hit to leadership, but it has hit my leadership as a pastor of the church, and seeing that the numbers are starting to be a little disparaging in our communities versus other communities. I have to raise the concern because I think it's a legitimate one.
And I don't disagree with that. We've been having the
We're listening.
We can't hear you, Doris. Okay, so
like Doris' screen is frozen. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
We were supposed to have a couple of medical professionals on the call today. So hopefully we can get them rescheduled so we can go in depth about how this is truly affecting the Black community and be able to get some of those questions answered. But I believe that we as a community, we probably just need to keep encouraging people to practice social distancing. You know, that's really, really, really important. So if you see something, say something until we're able to get some of this stuff figured out, and just to be safe and cautious at all times would be my.
Jill, if I may say something, first of all, thank you to the African American Chamber of Commerce for hosting this call. This really piqued my interest because many of you know my background. I spent 13 years as a reporter at the Ledger, and there's been significant coverage in terms of how COVID-19 has impacted the Black community, specifically in Polk County. We have some real issues, severe issues here, especially when it comes to congregating. There's been incidents reported all over this county, especially as it's been detailed in the latest Ledger article. And while it's good to, encourage social distancing, we really need to come up with some hard strategies on how we can communicate with one another. I was on a Zoom call last night, and I pointed out that the only time we in our community can see one another is Sunday at church. We don't go downtown. Before social distancing, we didn't go downtown where we can congregate, working professionals, that is, to meet up with one another. We just don't have a social meeting place for us to go to and idea share or deal with some of the issues that are being faced in the Black community. So all we have is the churches, and that's all we have right now. A lot of the churches are meeting online. One of the suggestions I had, and thanks to Pastor Eddie Lake, because he's doing this on his private pages, and as he's giving his address to his congregation and to his followers on Facebook. But our clergy, really, we depend on you. If you can take the first 15 minutes of your service and share some of this information and say, look, we need to be cognizant of the mothers of the church, the grandmothers of the church, because this is where some of these young men, they're going to take the virus back to if they're not practicing social distancing, if they're not wearing a mask in public. I mean, it's very disheartening to see the numbers and the fact that Polk County has outpaced now the state average. So we have to deal with this as leaders, to the point of, if it takes us having meetings through Zoom calls every week, that's what we do. We need to work with the law enforcement community. I can tell you that they are feeling overtaxed with this. I'm not going to name the city, but I spoke to a police chief of one city, and he informed me, he said, Marissa, we're chasing these groups from one location to another, and they're over it. And so whatever it takes from our leadership from our sororities, fraternities, our civic organizations. You know, everybody needs to be on a call to figure out how can we deal with this problem collaboratively so we can get the numbers down in the Black community.
May I respond just as a congregation leader? Some of the information we need to consider also in what's going on in this environment is that people are having to stay home, and that is presenting some different challenges than we've ever faced. One of the things that I would challenge all of you is to look at the numbers in your community, especially your police agencies or your arresting agencies, of the numbers of domestic violence that's going up, also in child abuse. Because we're noticing that over here in Orange County during the stay-at-home order, that people are starting to have these incidents go up and up. And one of the things I know is that this healthcare, mental health care in this crisis is very important also. I know a lot of people may have judged the people who the governor allowed to go out to the beaches, and you've seen all the herds of people getting out to the beaches wanting to get out. It is because this environment of staying at home also has a mental effect. And I think when we saw people going and running to those beaches, it really was a mental cry. I need space. I need to get out. What I've challenged my congregation to do is we have socially distant, responsible gatherings. Some may say, well, how can you do that? Well, if we're going to criticize the church for gathering and having congregations, nobody's criticizing the grocery stores or how the banks is congregating or restaurants is congregating. If we want to focus on just one particular institution that usually congregates one day out the week, not let alone all days out the week, then, I will call a question to that, because the church, if it's not seen as an essential business, then I don't know why we're in existence. Lastly, I say this. If we follow the stay-at-home order to the T, everybody stayed at home, didn't go anywhere, and people continue to die. People continue to die. Me as a spiritual leader, I just could not tell my folks to stay home and die. My heart would be to open up the doors of the church, and we will open up the doors to pray and believe for healing, which is an agency in the church that will pray and believe until death stops. That is still a valuable option, being an essential business in our community. We are considered a healing agency in the community, whether it be medical, whether it be social or psychological. We have to see ourselves, at least I do, have to see ourselves as an agency to help during these times. If we say we can only do electronic outreach, and when you have mentioned our mothers is not into, we got to especially take care for them because they're not into the electronic age. And so I just think we have to be very case sensitive. Case sensitive. You're asking me to put a blanket over all ministries in Winter Haven. I would just ask that, are we being responsible if we're gathering? If people are asking their pastor, I need somewhere to go, what are we to do? And we just say, no, we're not essential enough. And so that's my only challenge, that we be very case sensitive about what the needs are in our particulars.
Hello? Sharon?
Can we hear?
I'm here.
Okay. Yeah. Did you have any closing remarks? And we thank you, the pastor, for that. We're going to come back. I would like to hear, because we have some other pastors who are on here, preachers. I see Bruce Sanders, Reverend Sanders, and Reverend Hallman. So I want you to respond to Marissa's comment about what you do, and especially for our youth. And I know that's one of the concerns that Mrs. West has as well, is what about our youth and them congregating? What can we do to prevent that or help them so they don't congregate and then bring those, the virus rather, into the homes with their elderly? Another concern that we may consider as it relates to the deaths, I did contact Dr. Joy Jackson's office last week, and she appears to be just irresponsible to me, because the reason why we have this conference today is to talk about the COVID-19 and the devastation that it has impacted so badly into our communities, community of African descent. So I just felt that she did not follow through as she should have, and I'm saying that, and that's my experience. So any rate, I want to yield now if Pastor Hallman has anything. I know he has two capacities, but wear your pastor hat today and speak to that issue, and then after that, Reverend Sanders.
Good afternoon, and yes, it is a problem with anybody congregating in these kinds of environments where they shouldn't. But I don't want us to get sidetracked and think it's just African Americans, because law enforcement is experiencing the same things with the whites congregating on the lakes in boats. And it's as the pastor said, you know, people will only remain in a home so long, and they're gonna have to have a way out. You know, our job is certainly pray, encourage those, educate those not to do such things, and certainly be mindful that if they have a fever, cough, shortness of breath, anything of that nature, that they don't bring it home to grandma or granddaddy. But I don't want to think it's just a Black issue. It is not. It's a people's issue that's happening everywhere.
Thank you for that. And if you watch the news reports, you'll see that every day, especially now that, you know, people can go to the beaches and do whatever else they want to do. So thank you for that, Pastor Hallman, Reverend Hallman. So Reverend Sanders, you have a comment?
Good evening, or good afternoon, rather. Yes, what the pastor, I believe Pastor Harris said.
Can't hear you. Would you speak up?
Okay. Okay. What Pastor Harris said, what is it, is a problem, and like Pastor Hallman said, it's not just with African American, because here in Mulberry we had an issue where the police had to break up an issue with some other, I guess, white teens that were mulling up as well. But what we try to do is I try to encourage my people to practice not only the social distancing, but also with the various sanitation measures, where they can not only do it at church, but also do it at home. It's a tough thing with the young people, because you can only keep them, I say, occupied for so long. And then they get to the point when they start getting antsy, you know, and at that point, it's try to keep them, encourage them. I've run across various ones because I coach football at the high school, and I say, man, what you doing now? Coach, we had to do this, we had to do that. But you got to, whatever you do, you got to maintain, have some wisdom with this whole thing, because you actually can affect your whole family. So that's the kind of approach that I use as far as going and talking to them about it. But with that being said, that's a tough thing to try to get kind of corral or get a hold on.
Okay, thank you for that comment. Pastor Lake, did you want to respond to that as well?
Yes, thank you, Doris. I agree with all of the pastors, and our sincere concern, again, is for the welfare and the safety of all of the entire community. And so we have to continue to spread this word and encourage people to stay in as much as you possibly can. And when you have to get out, please wear a mask. Make sure you wash your hands. You wash your clothes extra. You do some extra disinfecting. It's important, but we also have to maintain our connectivity with each other. And because we are a people of connectivity, because we are a musical people, we can be creative in the things that we need to do to undergird ourselves, to support ourselves, so that we don't break connection with people. And I think it's absolutely critical that we continue to check on each other and we continue to keep the conversation lines of communication open in all aspects, reaching all people, because it's absolutely necessary to protect ourselves, to protect the most vulnerable. And we know that this too shall pass, but it's going to pass as we work with God to see us through this situation.
I just want to elaborate on my comment I made earlier, just so there's some clarity about what I said. And I'm not just only talking specifically about our community, but because this Zoom call is dealing with our community, because this has become a national news story, and the data in Polk County, I'm specifically focused on what the data is saying more than anything else, as to why, you know, I would just hope that our leaders countywide would continue the conversation collectively, because we need to have more collective conversations. And in addition to that, we need to make sure that we're sitting at the tables to get information, because there's not a day that goes by I'm having a conversation with somebody and they're totally unaware. So as much as we can share resources when there's calls like this, that we encourage our neighbors, the presidents of some of these civic organizations, because again, the only time we get to see one another is on Sunday for church. We do not gather, especially now, you know, but before COVID, there was no watering hole for minorities to go to, see one another, talk about the issues that are facing our community outside of church. So I get this is a community-wide problem. I get that there is happening with other groups of people, but also too, we have to be cognizant of what's happening in our community and making sure that we're sharing that information and engaging the leadership in the community, so that when these problems arise, another thing too that we're not having enough conversation about is our minority-owned businesses and how this has impacted them, you know, and how they can recover after all of this, you know, once we're able to open. I mean, I was on a Zoom call before this one with a group of business leaders in the Lakeland area, and they were talking about how it was impacted the business community. Now, there is no invisible door that says we can't walk through, but I don't know if it's a thing that we're unaware that some of these meetings are taking place, because it was a lot of good information that could also help and benefit some of our minority-owned business owners. But they're not at the table to hear these conversations so that they can know what resources are available out there to help them get through this difficult time.
Thank you, Marissa. If I can respond also to that, I want to echo, because that was the purpose of today's meeting, to talk specifically about how this is affecting African Americans. I would also encourage us, as we are encouraging social distancing more in the African American community, that we are also promoting good health, you know, good healthy eating habits, because the data says that we have the highest percentage of deaths because of all of these underlying conditions that we have as a people. So we need to change our mindset about what we eat, about exercising, because if we do some of those things, make some of those changes, hopefully that is going to result in reduced numbers in deaths moving forward. So we do need to continue the conversation. And I agree also with Marissa, I'm the secretary, so everyone who's been on the call, I'm sure Ms. Moore Bailey will agree, we'll be moving forward with, putting some connections and some committees in place to try to, in the short term, try to get some literature or something out to the public, particularly in the African American community, that hopefully will help to combat some of these issues that we're experiencing now as a result of COVID-19. So this is not our last discussion, moving forward. We're going to have many more because it's definitely needed.
And Marissa, we invite you to be a part of that and try to work with spearheading some communication directions to help us to move a positive agenda along as it relates to this critical time. So I also would like to extend to each of you who's not a member yet to join. 1 second. Yeah, 1 second, Sharon. Let me just state this real quickly. But for those who are not a member of the chamber, we have a 15% discount during this time because we know it's critical for most people. But if you'd like to join us, become a member, we certainly can use you. And just go to the website, and that's taaccpc.com, and you can sign up there. That's the website, and you can go and sign up there. But go ahead, Sharon, please. Go ahead.
My last comment, was listening to Marissa and everybody was speaking. That's why a lot of people are not sure what the county is doing in business. And we're doing a lot of things. And some people on the COVID Act, the CARES Act, don't even know how to fill out the paperwork. That's why I gave out those numbers. It's free. You don't have to pay anything for it. And there's somebody to help you walk through the process, but you need to do it sooner than later because like before, I guess the money went so fast. So they got another round coming. So get in touch with those ladies or myself so you would be ready for the next round of money for those small businesses. And if they're not on the line, we want to use this time for you all to get it out in the community that they need to contact Polk County to see whether or not we can help them walk through the process.
Mayor Bill Mutz is on the Facebook. He's watching live. For those who live in the city of Lakeland, do you have any questions for Mayor Mutz since he's on Facebook page watching?
Well, thank you, Mayor Mutz, for joining us today. I'm glad you were able to join us from your other meeting, so thank you for that. Do you have a question or do you have a comment? Can he speak to us? I mean, Jill? No? No? Okay.
No, he can't speak to us.
I just want to encourage you ladies to keep the conversation going because the stories out there in the community is very heartbreaking. I mean, to say the least. So thank you for having the foresight to host this kind of forum. We just need to have the conversation going and make sure that everybody in the community is getting the information they need to survive and thrive through this pandemic.
Okay, and I'd like to thank Barry Freeman, who's on the line. He's with Lakeland Now. He's the CEO and publisher of lakelandnow.com. So please go to his page and you can see a lot there. Information. I'd like to thank Candace Baker-Buford for being on. Candace, do you have a question or comment? Doretha Brooks, thank you so much. Freddie Robinson, any other questions or comments? Marissa, thank you so much. Go ahead, Candace. Okay. Joyce, question or comment?
Hi, Doris, it's Leah. May I make a comment?
Yes, go ahead, please, Leah.
I just want to thank each of you all for attending the Zoom conference. I've worked closely with Doris. She and I have coordinated some efforts to make sure that we're reaching out to the community. And the Congressman has already said, and he said it best, we are here, we are resourced, we're available. In the chat room, I've actually entered my contact information. I've entered the contact information for our office, our email address, and also our internet address. So again, I just want to leave you all with this. We are not visible physically, but we are here and we are able to respond quickly. Just please do not hesitate to contact us, okay?
Thank you, and thank you so much for today. It was great having you to have the Congressman on and helping to organize, so we appreciate your efforts. You're really out there and you're making it happen, so we appreciate that. And thank you, Jill. Thanks everyone, Pastor Lake, Sharon, and of course the Congressman, and of course each of you that are on here. If you can see Barry's information on here, Lakeland Now also has Marilyn Myers watching. Wow, it's for a possible article. Okay, well, thank you, Barry, for that. If there are no other questions or comments, this will, and thank you so much, Marissa, for kind of stimulating the discussion today and keeping us focused, and also Pastor Dexter Lamar Harris. Thank you so much for that. Thanks, everyone. Peace and blessings.
Thank you, Doris.
We'll be looking out for the next
session.
one.
Yes,
I didn't hear that.
Absolutely. We'll be looking out for the next session.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Pastor Lake. Thanks, everyone. Again, Leo, thanks so very much. Have a nice afternoon, everyone.
Stay safe, everybody.
Thank you. Bye now.